Hello, good evening. Tonight, I want to tell you a story about an old house. Can you believe it? A dilapidated house can make a lively child lose his mind and finally stay on that hillside. It is not a haunted house, nor is it a legendary haunted house. It is just a piece of land that has been neglected for a period of time, until that family moved in. That was decades ago. That little girl, her name was May. That was the era of the big pot, and everyone relied on collective work to eat. The team allocated an old house that originally belonged to a local rich man to the Lee family. It was one of the most dilapidated and remote houses in the whole village, but at that time it was considered a good accommodation. The Lee family has 4 children. The eldest is called Una, the only daughter in the family. The 3 younger brothers are of similar age, and the youngest is only 4 years old. Life was tight at home. My parents went out to work before dawn and returned exhausted after dark. The children were also busy. After school, they had to carry water and weed. They had to persevere even if they were hungry. We had only moved into this old house for half a month, and our family of 6 squeezed into 3 rooms. My parents lived on the small Kong in the inner room, and the children slept on the wide Kong in the outer room. At the end of the Kong was a mottled old door, with debris piled up behind it. The door was not locked, with only a faded curtain hanging on it, which seemed to be separating something and yet blocking nothing. Una slept at the end of the Kong, and the little sister slept at the head. The room was strangely quiet at night, with only the rustling of the window paper and the occasional sound of mice running away. I don't know when it started, but Una always felt cold every night, as if a cool breeze had penetrated the bed and was crawling up along her spine. Even in the hottest days of summer, she would still be woken up by the cold in the middle of the night. At first she thought it was because of her weak body and didn't think much about it. But gradually, every time in the dead of night, she would wake up from her dream. What's strange is that several of their brothers and sisters also said that they had been dreaming of cold wind and distant laughter recently, and they couldn't sleep well. One night, Una went to bed early as usual, felt sleepy, and soon fell into a deep sleep. I don't know how long it had been, but suddenly a faint laughter sounded in my ears, lightly, like a feather falling into the water, passing through the cochlea. She suddenly opened her eyes, her heart tightened, and she pricked up her ears to listen again. But all she could hear was the sound of breathing and the night wind outside the house. She looked around and saw that her siblings were sleeping soundly. But when she was about to close her eyes again, the laughter came again. This time it was closer, as if it was right next to my ear. The laughter was hollow and gentle, yet it was cold, as if it came from the ground. Una felt her heart skip a beat, her head buzzed, her hair stood on end, and her back felt cold, as if someone was slowly blowing a breath on her neck. She turned her head slowly, looking past the residual shadow of the oil lamp on the Kong and towards the door with a curtain. The curtains fluttered slightly, as if a night breeze was blowing, but the windows were clearly closed. She opened her eyes wide, and with trembling hands, she slowly turned her head to the side. With just one glance, she froze as if struck by lightning. Behind the curtain, 2 women were standing against the wall, wearing the same clothes: pink satin pants, a red satin short jacket with a small stand-up collar, a blooming peony embroidered on the chest, and wide cuffs with silk ribbons trailing. They wore embroidered shoes, had their hair combed shiny, and had jade hairpins on their temples, which gleamed faintly in the moonlight. The most terrifying thing is their faces, pale and stiff, but with a strange smile at the corner of his lips. That smile didn't look like joy, but more like scrutiny and teasing. His eyes were empty, but staring straight at her. Yuna wanted to shout, but her throat felt like it was blocked by a stone, and she couldn't make a sound. She pinched her thigh and it hurt. It wasn't a dream. She gritted her teeth and tried to turn over, but found that her whole body was already soaked in cold sweat and even her fingers were trembling. She only had time to close her eyes, and when she opened them again, the two women were still standing there. Not an illusion, not a nightmare. She finally let out a scream, as if she wanted to shout out all the fear in her chest. The siblings were awakened, and their parents heard the noise and rushed in with kerosene lamps. "What's wrong?" The room was instantly illuminated by lights. Nothing at all. The curtains were still hanging and the door was still closed. Only Yuna was huddled in the corner of the Kong, hugging the quilt, her face pale and her whole body trembling. I saw two women standing at the door. Mother frowned and shook her head. "Are you dreaming?" Father just said, "Don't scare yourself. You still have to work tomorrow." They didn't say anything more, just comforted her briefly and left. But that night, Yuna didn't dare to close her eyes the whole night. She could only cover her head, hold the corner of the quilt tightly, and force herself to stay still until dawn. After that terrifying night, Yuna felt as if her whole body was hollowed out the next day. Her hair felt heavy and her arms felt weak when she was working. Her parents still didn't believe it and said that she was dreaming too real and her brain was filled with wind. But Yuna knew that it was not a dream. The appearance of the two women was so clear that it seemed as if they were still standing in front of her. Night falls again. Yuna was very sleepy after working all day and fell asleep as soon as she got on the Kong. But in the middle of the night, she suddenly opened her eyes. It was that same cold air that crawled up my spine like a water snake. She didn't dare to move or open her eyes. She could only prick up her ears and listen quietly. That voice came again. It was low and soft, as if he was laughing with his hands covering his mouth, or as if he was whispering mischievously in her ear, with a chill in his voice. She clenched her teeth, curled up into a ball, and tried not to look. The laughter was getting closer and closer, and I could even feel two pairs of eyes behind me, looking through my skin and into my bones. She huddled under the quilt and reached out to feel her little sister's hand, which was small and soft, like a life-saving rope. That night, she stayed awake until dawn before falling into a drowsy sleep. If she didn't sleep well, she would have no energy to work. The next day, she took a nap leaning against a tree at the edge of the field. When she came back, her parents scolded her for being lazy. After dinner, before it got completely dark, my parents went back to their room to rest. Yuna was walking home alone, carrying a large basket of grass on her back. The moonlight was unusually bright, and it looked like silver sand scattered on the ground. She quickened her pace, just wanting to get back home as soon as possible. But when she glanced down inadvertently, she was stunned. There are two of her shadows. She turned around suddenly and there was no one behind her. Looking at the ground again, the shadow became one again. She bit her lip and trotted a few steps. When she looked down again, the second shadow quietly emerged, clinging to her back like a green vine attached to her bones. It's not an illusion. It's not. Her legs went limp and she started running, shouting, "Dad! Mom! In the yard, the parents heard the shouting and came out with a lantern. Una rushed over and hugged their arms, her whole body trembling, her voice dry. "Shadow, I have two shadows." The parents quickly looked at the ground and said, "Nonsense! Isn't there only one?" She looked down and saw that there was indeed only one shadow on the ground. Mother frowned. "You are dazzled? Don't scare yourself. That's right. You seem to be talking nonsense all day long, and you are not paying attention to your work." Una knew that they still didn't believe it. She wanted to retort, but swallowed the words back when they reached her lips. She was used to it, but the question in her mind grew heavier and heavier. Why did she always see those things? After dinner, Father said he would go out the next day and ask the children to stay at home to look after the house. Finally, they could take a day off. Una and the others agreed immediately. That night, Una slept holding her little sister's hand as usual. As long as she held it, she felt like she could draw courage from her thin little hand. In the middle of the night, a chill came in through the window, making her nose numb. She turned over and was about to cover herself with the quilt again, when suddenly, a cold hand gently stroked her face from her forehead. The fingers were long and slender, as cold as if they were soaked in snow water, yet so gentle as if they were afraid of disturbing her. Una was instantly furious and opened her eyes suddenly, only to see a woman quickly retract her hand with the familiar smile still on her face. She screamed and woke up her brothers and sisters. "What's wrong?" She pointed in the direction of the curtain, staring at it intently without blinking. "Yes, they are coming again." The siblings were all scared and crying. I don't know if they were scared by her or if they also saw something. The parents heard the noise and rushed over, holding a lamp and asking breathlessly, "What happened again?" She touched me. The two women are still behind the curtain. The parents looked at each other, finally gave up and sighed. "Okay, then you sleep with us tonight." That night, everything was finally peaceful. But the next morning, my parents went out. The door was closed tightly, and before leaving, many instructions were given, not allowing anyone to go out. The room was quiet. Just as we were about to clear the dishes after dinner, the little sister suddenly screamed and pointed towards the outer door with a pale face. Una looked in the direction of her hand. In the crack of the door, a pale face was pressed tightly against the gap, and one eye was staring into the room. His face was paler than paper, even with a bluish hue, and his facial features seemed to be hollowed out, with only his eyeballs still rolling around. Several people screamed at the same time, crawled into the inner room, bolted the door, shrank to the corner of the Kong, and covered themselves with the quilt. No one spoke, only heavy breathing and rapid heartbeats. After a long time, the younger sister gently lifted the quilt a little. "It seems that there is no movement. Is he gone?" They got off the Kong carefully and looked out through the crack in the door. There was no one there. I opened the door and walked to the outer room. Still no one was there. Just as they were breathing a sigh of relief, the youngest little sister screamed, "Wow!" again. The face appeared again through the crack of the door. They ran back to the inner room, slammed the door shut, bolted it again, and hid under the quilts again. No one dared to go out again. At that moment, they all understood. This was not a dream. The room was dead silent. Several children huddled in a corner. No one dared to speak, for fear that if they made a sound, that face would appear again. I don't know how long it was, but But suddenly there was a hurried knock on the door. "Yuna, open the door. We're back." It's the voice of parents. The children were almost crying. They rushed to the door, pulled the bolt, and rushed out. My parents stood at the door, puzzled. What happened? We knocked for a long time, but no one opened the door. Yuna opened her mouth and was about to answer, but suddenly froze. She saw the face. It was still sticking to the corner of the kitchen, motionless, smiling towards them. "There!" Yuna pointed at the stove and shrank back. Her parents looked in the direction of her finger, were stunned at first, and then anger rose in their eyes. Father picked up the broom from the corner, swung it, and rushed over. "Who are you, you filthy thing, to dare to scare my child? Get out! Get out!" Mother also raised the fire tongs, chanted an old curse, and shouted, "Unclean things, don't get involved in our family. Get out!" But the face did not move. It just looked at him vaguely from behind the curtain, as if provoking him or waiting for something. They cursed and chased after it, but the shadow disappeared. But not long after, it appeared behind the curtain again, as if it was deliberately playing a trick on them. It went back and forth over and over again until the sun set, and then it completely disappeared. The sky gradually darkened, but I didn't dare turn on the lights in the house. It seemed as if something was floating in the air, damp and cold, like water vapor, or like a person's unsteady breath. The parents finally decided not to let the children sleep in the outer room. That night, they rearranged the Kong in the inner room and blocked out a space with wooden boards so that the children could squeeze in. Although the room was a little stuffy, at least no one was left alone outside anymore. At night, Yuna slept soundly for the first time in her life. But the next day, parents still had to go out to work. The youngest little sister was too young to run, so she had to be locked in the house. The food was placed on the cupboard, and she was left alone to look after the house. The little sister was named May. She was only 4 years old, but she was very clever, sweet-mouthed, sensible, and not afraid of people. Everyone in the village liked to tease her, and she always responded with a smile. At that time, the work teams from the village often came to the households for inspection. Every time they came, May would come forward, sing a nursery rhyme, and do a little dance. Her voice was crisp and her smile was so innocent that even the usually serious lesbians were made to laugh out loud by her. And she herself always knew how to please others. That afternoon, Mother asked Yuna to go home early to cook. Yuna walked into the yard carrying a basket of vegetables, but heard a lot of noise in the house, as if several people were talking and laughing. She was stunned. The door is locked, who could be inside? She quickened her pace and quickly opened the door. The moment she walked in, all the sounds stopped abruptly. The room was empty, but the air is still filled with the afterglow of the bustle, just like a theater that has just ended and some of the warmth is still lingering. On the Kong, May was holding a rag doll with a lingering smile on her face and tears in the corners of her eyes. "Who were you talking to just now?" Yuna tried to keep her voice calm. May lowered her head and whispered, "They won't let me tell you. They won't let me tell you." "Who?" "They live behind that cupboard." She pointed in the direction of the pile of junk, her tone light, as if she was talking about the weather. Yuna's heart suddenly tightened. In the following days, she began to sneak back home. Every time I entered the yard, I could hear May talking in the house. Her tone was cheerful and sometimes she would hum a song, as if she was chatting with someone, but she was clearly home alone. Yuna felt increasingly uneasy and suggested to her mother that they send her little sister to a neighbor's house for a while. But her mother refused outright. "It's just a small matter. Is it worth owing a favor to someone?" She couldn't persuade him, so she had to be more cautious when returning home every day. Until that day, May suddenly called her sister. As soon as she entered the room, she felt that her little sister's face looked strange. It was as yellow as paper, but her eyes were particularly bright. "May, what's wrong? I'm hungry and want to eat steamed bread. It should be almost time for dinner." But Yuna said, "Wait a little longer. It will be time for dinner soon." But May looked at her and said softly, "It's too late. Let me have a bite. I'm leaving." The voice was very soft, but it pierced Yuna's heart like a needle. She was stunned for a moment, not knowing how to respond. "Don't be silly. I'll go heat you a piece." May shook her head. "No need. I'll just put it on the Kong and cover it while eating." As she spoke, she broke off a small piece of steamed bread from the head of the Kong, held it in her palm, and wrapped it in the quilt. After chewing a few bites, she raised her head again and looked at Yuna, her eyes gentle and dim. "Sister, can you ask Mom to come in? I want to see her." As she spoke, her eyes turned red, as if she was holding back tears. Yuna turned around and ran out to call her mother. "Mom, May said she missed you, so she asked you to go in and see her." Mother, who was grinding the millstone in the yard, didn't even raise her head. "I'm busy. There are so many people to feed. How can I have time to coax her?" Yuna ran back again, but May smiled. "Then please help me beg her again. I want her to hug me." Yuna rushed out again and shouted, "Mom, please go in. I think she is not right." Mother finally put down her work impatiently. "You just make trouble all day long. What's wrong? Aren't you just hungry?" But as soon as I walked into the house, Mother's expression changed. May threw himself into her arms, hugged her tightly, said nothing, and just cried silently. The mother was stunned. She looked down at the child in her arms. Her heart suddenly tightened. "Yuna, go call your father and get a doctor quickly." Mother held May in her arms, her little face pressed against her shoulder, motionless. The child's body temperature seemed to have suddenly been drained away, leaving only a damp chill. The doctor came quickly, felt the pulse, and took the temperature. He frowned and said, "It's just common typhoid fever. You'll be fine after an injection and some medicine and a few days of rest." He took out a needle from the medicine box and stabbed it into May's thin arm. Mother wanted to put her back on the Kong, but May held her neck tightly and refused to let go. "She doesn't look right," Mother whispered, with red in the corners of her eyes. Just then, the door curtain moved and Yuna's Uncle Wei walked in. Uncle Wei had been in the underworld when he was young and knew some martial arts. People in the village said that he had a strong yang energy. As soon as he entered the room, he was stunned. His face suddenly darkened, and his brows were tightly furrowed. "Quick, light the fire," he said in a deep voice, his voice like thunder. "The sooner the better." Yuna was startled and quickly grabbed the matches. "Yuna, your mother. Hold her and don't let go. The rest of you surround her and keep shouting her name. Don't stop." Everyone gathered around immediately, shouting May's name. Yuna struck a match. No, another one. 2 more. A whole box of matches, but not a single one could light up. The air pressure in the room seemed to drop in an instant, and even the air became sticky. May suddenly opened her eyes. A smile appeared on the corner of her mouth, and her voice was as light as the wind. "I'll sing a song for you, okay?" She sang her favorite nursery rhyme in her tender voice, her voice clear but hollow like an echo from a well. Halfway through the song, her eyes suddenly widened and her whole body suddenly leaned back, with her head almost twisted behind her shoulders. "Hurry!" Uncle Wei yelled, grabbed a match and struck it hard. With a swish sound, the fire finally lit up. At the moment the flames started, May suddenly let out a long breath. Her body softened, and her head rested on Mother's shoulder, as if she had finally fallen asleep. The mother cried heartbreakingly and held her tightly, refusing to let go. "Brother, she is still waiting for the fire." Uncle Wei suddenly turned around and jumped onto the stove, lifted the lid of the big pot, turned it over and put it on the ground. On the ash layer at the bottom of the pot, there was a row of small footprints extending all the way to the chimney. Her soul left, following the smoke from the stove. The whole family felt chilled to the bone when they heard this. May is really gone. No one questioned or doubted it anymore. It was all clear as day. There is an unwritten rule in the village. Children who die young are not allowed to be buried in the cemetery. The small earthen slope at the entrance of the village was reserved for such situations. Dead children could only be wrapped in a broken mat and carried up the slope to be blown by the wind and eaten by wild animals. It is said that this is the only way to be born into a good family as soon as possible. The next afternoon, Uncle Wei and Father personally sent May to the barren slope. The tattered mat was wrapped tightly, revealing only May's face. She looked like she was asleep, with a little warmth on her face, without a trace of decay. They put her on the top of the slope, looked around, sighed, and turned away. When I went to check again in the evening, there was nothing unusual about May's body. Not even the corners of her clothes had been bitten, and the mat somehow opened up by itself, as if someone had broken free from inside. Father felt uneasy and quickly tied the mat again. The next day, go again. May was still intact, her face rosy, as if she was sleeping soundly. What was even more strange was that her head turned and was facing the direction of home. The mat is open again. Father didn't dare to get closer anymore. He just looked at her from a distance and then lowered his head and went home. And Mother did not sleep in the house all night. Just after midnight, a sound of footsteps came from outside, slowly walking across the yard and stopping at the door of the house. Everyone heard it, but no one dared to speak. Mother's face was pale, but her eyes were fixed on the door. The footsteps paused for a moment in front of the door, then went around the window and entered the house. Squeak! The wooden bench was gently pulled open. Bang, bang, bang. It was the sound of a small spoon hitting a porcelain bowl, familiar and real. They knew she was hungry. That was her favorite little bowl, that was the little stool she sat on, and those were the little footprints she made as she sang back and forth. She is back. It was not until she finished her meal that the footsteps slowly and quietly left the courtyard gate and disappeared in the night wind. The parents' faces were covered with tears and no one spoke. This happened every night for 3 days in a row. Mother would go to the slope to check on May during the day. May's body was still the same as before, with rosy skin, soft body, and even a smile seemed to be hanging in the corners of her eyes. The mother sat far away, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't dare to get any closer. At that moment, she knew the child doesn't want to leave, and they should also make a break. After several nights of terror, Uncle Wei made a decision. We can't let her stay here any longer, otherwise, I'm afraid the other children in the family will get hurt. That night, he used ashes to draw a circle around the hillside, as if drawing a temporary resting place for his little sister. The next day, Father took his younger brother to the hillside, but Mother was afraid and did not dare to go with them. She just stood at the entrance of the village and watched from a distance. Yuna was collecting firewood behind the house. The pile of firewood was getting higher and higher, and the anxiety in her heart was also growing little by little. The fire was built and May was lifted up again. She still looked like she was asleep. Her little face was clean. Her hands were curled up in front of her chest, and there was a faint smile on the corners of her mouth. Uncle Wei gently placed her on the firewood pile and lit the fire. The fire suddenly lit up, illuminating the evening sky red and burning everyone's eyes red. But just as the flames began to consume her, May's body suddenly moved. She sat up. In the firelight, her body rolled and twitched, falling back into the woodpile again and again, and bouncing up again and again, as if she was still struggling. Was she crying? Was she shouting? No one knew. As the flames danced, her facial features gradually twisted, as if she was in pain, unwilling, or saying, "Don't burn me." Yuna was so scared that she hid in her mother's arms, trembling all over, while her mother's tears had already soaked through her clothes. Finally, everything fell silent. May's body slowly turned into ashes in the flames, leaving nothing behind. After that, her footsteps were never heard again at night. Peace finally returned to the home. On the morning of the 7th day, the son of another family in the village suddenly died. He was only 9 years old. It has almost become a strange rule. When a girl dies, a boy will definitely die afterwards. A few days later, an old woman in the village also died inexplicably. Everyone said that there was something wrong with the house and that it was the old house that was to blame. Yuna and her family finally decided to move away, and the team agreed and arranged a new place for them to live. The family that lost their son also moved away. The house was completely vacant. As time went by, the walls began to peel off and the tiles became loose, turning it into a deserted house. Later, the village decided to convert it into a primary school, repair the roof, and hire an old man to guard the building. But something strange happened again. Every morning when the old man woke up, he would lie in the yard with hemp ropes wrapped around his body. The hemp ropes were the same thread used to make shoe soles. No one knows where the line came from. In the east of the village, there was an old lady who specialized in making hemp twine and selling it. Overnight, a basket of hemp twine that she had just made disappeared out of thin air. How was it possible when the twine was 4 or 5 miles away? Later, students said that they often heard someone running around in the corridor at night, even though there was no one there. Sometimes a woman in pink satin would be reflected in the bathroom mirror, smiling at them. The noise became more and more serious, and the team finally decided to completely demolish the house. On the day of construction, I suddenly hit a hard object while digging the soil. There are 2 coffins. After opening it, everyone gasped. There was a female corpse lying in each coffin, wearing a jade hairpin on the head, a satin dress, and embroidered shoes on the feet. The clothes were exactly the same as those of the 2 women that Yuna saw that night. At that moment, all the legends seemed to be confirmed. Even more bizarrely, a small jar was found in the coffin. According to local customs, when burying a person, a clay pot filled with half a pot of rice should be placed in the coffin and then sealed with red paper, which means ascending to heaven with wealth. But when the jar was opened, everyone was stunned. The rice inside was gone, and in its place, there was a toad. The toad's eyes turned red and green, and it was exhaling. It jumped lightly, then crawled out of the jar and disappeared at everyone's feet. No one knew how it got in, and no one dared to chase it. I just remember that the whole village became quiet from then on. The school is no longer haunted, and the hemp rope no longer entangles people. It's just that every year in the 7th month of the lunar calendar, there are always people saying, late at night, you can see a pair of figures standing side by side next to the old house, looking quietly into the distance, as if they are waiting for someone. Later, the room was no longer there. The foundation was flattened, the tiles were swept away, and even May's ashes became the wind. But every July, when someone passes by the village entrance in the middle of the night, they always say they see. There seemed to be a face at the stove door, and then it disappeared in a flash. Are you asking me if I believe it? As for me, I don't believe it, and I dare not believe it. I only remember that before my Uncle Wei died, he was still muttering, "Are those women wearing embroidered shoes still standing in the corner, laughing?" I am Mr. Dread, a friend who will accompany you into the night with stories. If you also have something unforgettable, please leave your story in the comment section. We see you in the next story.